Re-
Hello, everyone. My name is Mariah Razo, and I am studying psychology at the University of North Texas. I have been conducting my research this past semester under my faculty mentor, Dr. Daphne Harris. This past year, I have dedicated my time to conducting my research over adverse childhood experiences and resiliency factors. I chose this topic as there has been an increased interest over the effects that adverse childhood experiences have on a child's cognitive development, as well as their socio-emotional development and what this looks like going into their adulthood. A familiar theory that was introduced by Jean Piaget is Piaget's stages of development. This theory states that a child goes through various stages of development until they reach the final stage where they are able to think abstractly and engage in a more complex executive processes, including emotional awareness. This is an important thing to consider as child development is a crucial part in the development of their cognitive abilities as well as their social-emotional awareness, leaving children who have experienced trauma during this time very vulnerable to significant changes that could impact their developmental trajectory moving on into to adulthood, as well as how they are able to manage their social-emotional awareness. Current studies have focused primarily on the deficits of these experiences that they create. However, there has been a lack of research on the opposite side of that, and looking more at what are those factors that could mitigate the effects of these experiences, and also looking at what are the preventative measures that could be taken to reduce the number of adverse childhood experiences that children are experiencing, as well as looking at more of the qualitative side of the research. There is a lot of research out there right now that refers to looking at the quantitative side, but there's a lack of research looking at the qualitative side, as in what these lived experiences look like for children who have these traumatic events in their life. This study aims to move beyond the focus on cognitive development, which current research shows, and to explore more the relationship between ACE and their socio-emotional well-being into adulthood. Before I continue, I would like to review some key terms that will be used throughout the presentation, beginning with adverse childhood experiences. Adverse childhood experiences, otherwise known as ACE, can be presented in various forms such as physical, emotional, environmental. And for example, these could be things such as physical abuse, emotional abuse, community violence, experiencing domestic abuse in the home, substance abuse, community violence in their bad neighborhoods, etc. For the purposes of this study, resilience will be defined as a child's ability to cope and recover from a traumatic event. This will include preventative factors, which are measures which could be taken to prevent the child from experiencing a traumatic event, and interventive factors that could help mitigate the effects that occur. As previously described, there has been an increase in interest over this topic, as studies have shown that nearly 60% of adults have experienced some form of childhood trauma. A quarter of those that were reported have also reported experiencing more than 3 forms of an adverse childhood experience. These numbers are really important to consider, as other studies have found that the higher level counts of ACEs that a person experiences leads to be strong predictors for things such as mood disorders as well as behavior disorders. For example, one study found that exposure to partner violence led to increasing internalizing behaviors for girls and externalizing behaviors for boys during their adolescence. I began my study by conducting an intense literature review, which I spent the bulk of my research time looking into and focusing on. Through this, I made sure to look for gaps, as well as really digging into the current studies that are currently out there, looking for things that may have been missing in the current research and taking note of those things. Identifying these gaps allowed me to structure and formulate a more specific research question, as well as to build a criteria for the studies that will be used in my review. After I conducted this, I selected of multiple articles, and I began to analyze each and their findings and compare these results. Thus far, I found that there was very little research on the preventative and interventive measures that could be used as resilience resources to mitigate the negative effects of ACE. Current research shows much of the quantitative data as in focusing solely on the effects rather than what we could be doing to reduce those effects or prevent them. However, from the data that was collected in the articles, there was significant findings geared toward the significance of early care and education programs. Studies found that children who have been resilient to ACEs generally have a nurturing and consistent figure, or otherwise known as an always available adult in their life. And typically these figures can come in many various different forms. These could be a single parent. These could also be in the form of educators, after school programs, or school faculty that are involved in these children's lives outside of the home. These programs have also been shown to be successful, as many up and coming education programs have begun to take a trauma-informed approach in which these figures are trained to understand the role of trauma and their effects, allowing the adult figure to have a better grasp and understanding of the child. We have seen in recent studies as well that not only are education programs taking this approach, but there has been much more talk and interest in translating this trauma-informed approach into businesses, into the ideas of policymakers, and in different areas that will allow for a better exposure to what adverse childhood experiences are and how we could be dealing with them. Additionally, studies have also found that preventative measures, such as raising awareness of ACEs and things such as positive parenting, were successful in helping diminish those negative effects as well. These preventative measures could include things such as raising awareness on mental health, as well as providing low-income families with better mental health resources to be able to tackle and overcome these adversities, as well as working with policymakers to provide a more economic support for these families who may be experiencing a lot of stress due to financial reasons, and etc. These can be seen, one program that this could be seen as in the Children's Resilience Initiative. This program was created to raise awareness around childhood trauma within communities. And this program focuses on creating these various programs so that families can understand the effects of experiencing such traumatic events, and also how to deal and cope with these in a healthy way so that the child can have a better, more successful outcome in the future. Communities who engaged in this program found that suspension in high schools in their area dropped by 15%. One of those effects that was discussed previously was children maybe having those cognitive deficits, and this could lead to things such as becoming antisocial, not wanting to work as much in their classroom, and things such as that. And so with this program and raising awareness about that, they found in this area that bad behavior and suspension actually dropped. Additionally, with my study, I also went, after conducting the systematic review, I went again to continue my research and taking a more different approach and focusing more on the lived experiences of the individuals who actually had an adverse childhood experience. So with this, I went ahead and interviewed several other college students. They were asked to volunteer to participate in an in-depth interview that went into depth regarding their experiences as a child, their experiences now as an adult, and what were the factors that helped them to become successful. Of the participants that were interviewed, all are deemed to be successful. They have graduated from a four-year university and are working or working to graduate from a four-year university. And those who have graduated have gone on to receive full-time jobs. And so with these interviews, after reviewing the information and comparing it to the systematic review and information that was previously found, I found that a lot of the results that were being found in the quantitative research were also reflected in the qualitative side of the study, which I did with the in-depth interviews. This included things such as some of those factors being that always available adult that was there, the nurturing figure that was able to be there to motivate these individuals that were interviewed, as well as having some sort of support network. This necessarily, what I found in the study, it did not have to be a guardian or a parental figure, but it also showed to be to provide resilience with just having the support, as in peers or friend groups, people that they spend a lot of time with, and who they were surrounding themselves with. Their networking community was essentially what seemed to be the biggest factor or role that played in actually becoming resilient and diverse. Aside from that, I also found that a lot of the factors that allowed these individuals to become successful were also the internal or intrinsic characteristics that they had, such as things as having motivation, self coping skills, as well as knowing when to remove themselves from situations. A report that was made from several of the interviewees was knowing when to remove themselves from the situation and place themselves into a more positive, nurturing, and healthy environment, which also factored into allowing them to become more successful in their future. These findings are significant. Now, as the interest has become so heavy on adverse childhood experiences, because mental health professionals can use this, as well as various different education programs, as well as policymakers and different areas that we as a society can be acknowledging and putting work to develop new strategies and methods for dealing with children who have had an adverse childhood experience, and also learning how to cope with these and prevent them, so we are able to reduce the number of people who are experiencing these things. Moving forward, I hope to continue in this research and continue exploring these various different areas and effects, especially looking at the different populations that adverse childhood experience can come up in, where they might be more prevalent or less prevalent, looking at different cultures that deal with these. For example, looking at the maybe Latinx Hispanic culture and what their view on is on mental health, and then looking on the other side for a different race or culture, ethnicity. I would specifically like to focus on really looking into how we as a society can shift the narrative from focusing more on how we are going to deal with the situation, rather than how are we going to prevent the situation. From the research that I found, a lot of the source of the problems come from things such as economic instability, lack of housing instability, different areas that cause these traumatic events to happen as well. With this study, I really just also hope to raise awareness and shed light on these areas in which we can all take a part or play to become more trauma informed in our everyday lives as just individual people. And with this, I also would like to be able to create a more positive and nurturing environment as a whole.